Los Angeles had this strange way of wrapping you in silence, even when the city was screaming. The hum of distant traffic, neon signs flickering with indifference, and pedestrians rushing through their lives like extras in someone else's movie. Elon Musk walked unnoticed through the streets of downtown, his hoodie pulled low over his forehead, a navy baseball cap shadowing the top half of his face. No entouraje, no cameras. Just a man looking for something he couldn't name. He hadn't planned this walk. In fact, he hadn't planned much of anything lately. Sometimes when his head got too full of Mars trajectories, battery storage formulas, and whispered betrayals in boardrooms, he'd vanish. No one knew about these disappearances. He liked it that way. Tonight, he wasn't the tech billionaire. He wasn't the Tesla visionary or SpaceX's prophet. He was just Elon walking. The rain came without warning, soft at first, then angrier, like the sky was clearing its throat. He didn't run. He didn't flinch. He let it soak into his sleeves, into the fabric of who he was trying to remember being. The streetlights painted halos on the wet pavement, and his sneakers echoed with each step past closed shops and glowing diners. That's when he saw her. She was standing near the mouth of an alley, underneath a sagging awning that barely shielded her from the downpour. A cardboard sign hung loosely from her hands, its edges bending under the rain. The words were scribbled in thick black marker, now smudging into unreadable streaks. Pregnant. Alone. Please help. She couldn't have been more than 17. Her hoodie clung to her body, and the bump of her belly was unmistakable beneath it. She had this look, half defiance, half fear, as if the world had dared her to survive, and she'd replied with a trembling maybe. Elon slowed down, not because he recognized her, not because he had some messiah complex waiting to kick in. It was something else. The way she wasn't yelling, wasn't panhandling aggressively, wasn't crying. She just stood there, rain in her hair, eyes staring straight ahead like she'd already seen the end of her own movie. For a few seconds, he thought about walking past her. Just another sad face in a city of collapsed dreams. But his feet didn't cooperate. She looked up. Their eyes met. That was the moment. There was no flicker of recognition in her gaze, no gasp of, "Oh my God, are you Elon Musk?" Just a tired awareness that someone had stopped. "Do you need help?" he asked quietly. Her eyes narrowed. "I'm not scamming, if that's what you're thinking." He blinked. Her voice was steady, sharper than he expected. "I didn't say you were. Most people do. Or they just look through me, like I'm fog on their windshield." She shivered. The rain had started to seep through the awning now, dripping steadily onto her sign. "Come on," Elon said, gesturing toward the 24-hour diner across the street. "Let's get out of the rain." She hesitated. "I'm not trying to sell you anything. Or recruit you for a cult," he added dryly. That made her smirk, just barely. "Do you always use diner food to lure pregnant girls?" "Only on Mondays," he deadpanned. She looked both ways, then followed him. Inside the diner, the fluorescent lights hummed like nervous insects. A jukebox played a forgotten tune from the early 2000s. A waitress barely glanced at them before slapping 2 menus on the table. Elon took the booth near the window. She slid into the seat across from him, eyeing the laminated menu like it was written in hieroglyphics. "What's your name?" he asked, not opening his own menu. "Emily." "How far along?" 7 months. "Give or take?" "Why, you got a degree in medicine hiding under that hoodie." He chuckled. "No, but I know some things about pressure and propulsion." She snorted. "Cute." The waitress returned. Elon ordered black coffee. Emily asked for waffles, eggs, and a side of pickles. When the waitress left, she leaned in slightly. "You still haven't told me your name." "Elon." Her eyes froze on him. "Wait, Elon. Elon." "Yup." "No way." "Way." She leaned back in the booth, eyes wide, almost laughing. "And here I was thinking I might be murdered in a diner by a creepy guy in a hoodie. Turns out I'm being fed by a billionaire." "I'm full of surprises," he said, sipping his coffee. Emily's shoulders softened. She picked at her napkin. "Why'd you stop?" she asked suddenly. He looked at her, then out the window. The rain had turned the city into a watercolor painting. Because you didn't ask for anything. You just stood there, like you were waiting for the universe to answer. And you think you're the universe now. He smiled. "Maybe I'm just listening on its behalf tonight." She didn't reply right away. "I'm not used to people stopping," she murmured. "Not since everything. Want to talk about it?" She shook her head. "I'll wait," he said gently. And he would. Something told him this wasn't a detour in his evening, it was a beginning. Outside, the rain kept falling. But inside that booth, the clock paused. Two strangers with nothing in common but an unexpected intersection in the timeline of their lives. One running from the noise in his head, the other just trying to be heard. And neither of them knew it yet, but the night had just shifted history. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and old hope. Elvis hummed low from a jukebox, as if even the music were unsure of its place in the present. Steam curled from Elon's mug untouched, while Emily attacked her plate with quiet, focused fury. She didn't speak for the first 5 minutes, just chewed, swallowed, and blinked slowly, as if the food might vanish if she looked away. Elon watched not with pity, but with that peculiar stillness of a man who had seen launch failures and billion-dollar collapses, but found this moment, the silence between waffle bites, more fragile than anything he'd engineered. "You eat like someone who hasn't in a while," he said gently. She didn't look up. "Because I haven't." Another bite. Syrup dripped from her fork onto her sleeve, and she didn't bother wiping it. "They kick you out?" he asked. Her jaw moved, pausing briefly. She swallowed. "Not exactly. I left." "Why?" Now she looked at him, fork suspended midair. Her eyes weren't defiant anymore. They were just tired. Like she'd been tired for years, not months. Because staying felt worse. Elon nodded slowly. He didn't ask more. He knew the tone. It was the sound of someone who'd spent too long explaining herself to people who didn't care about the answers. "What about your parents?" he asked after a pause. "They stopped answering," she said, voice flat. "Last time I called, it went straight to voicemail. I thought maybe they blocked me. Or maybe they just gave up." Elon didn't reply immediately. He took a sip of coffee that had long gone cold and bitter. "Do you want them to come back?" he asked. She sighed. "Wanting doesn't do much. I wanted the father to stay, too." He didn't. He watched her hands. One held the fork. The other rested protectively on her belly, fingers drumming lightly against the sweatshirt fabric. "And him?" he asked. Her face darkened. "Gone before the 3rd month. Said he wasn't ready." I said neither was I. Guess that wasn't the bonding moment I hoped for. Elon offered a small smile, the kind that said, "I've heard worse, but this still sucks. Do you have a name picked out?" She blinked, caught off guard by the question. Then slowly she nodded. "If it's a girl, Zoe. If it's a boy, maybe Noah. I like names that feel soft but still strong, you know?" He nodded. "That makes sense." Another silence settled between them, but it wasn't heavy. Just tentative. "Why are you being nice to me?" she asked finally. Elon chuckled softly. "I get asked that more than you'd think. But usually by people who know who you are." "Exactly. So what's the answer?" He leaned back, his hoodie creaking as it adjusted over his shoulders. "Because I could tell you weren't asking for money. You were asking for something harder. Which is time, attention, respect." She stared at him, fork forgotten, as if trying to decode the sincerity behind the answer. Eventually, she nodded once, as if giving him a passing grade. "Still weird, though," she said. "You, of all people, walking around alone and buying waffles for pregnant strangers." He shrugged. "Maybe I needed someone to talk to just as much as you did." She smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. The rain had slowed outside, drizzling against the diner windows like background noise in an old movie. Elon glanced at the clock. 12:47 a.m. "You got somewhere to go after this?" he asked. Emily paused, then shook her head. "Usually I crash in the back of a delivery truck behind a supermarket. They leave it unlocked sometimes." Not ideal, but dry. He stared at her. You're kidding. She raised an eyebrow. Do I look like I'm in a joking mood? No, he said. You look like someone who deserves better. That's a nice line, she said, but her voice cracked a little. Elon reached into his pocket, pulled out a key fob, and spun it once on the table. It stopped pointing at her. I have a safe place, he said. Not a shelter, not a trick, just a house I keep for moments like this. Emily's body stiffened. The street-smart part of her flared up, scanning his face for lies. But all she found was exhaustion that matched her own. Why, she asked. Because I don't think genius and kindness should be mutually exclusive. Are you calling yourself a genius? He smirked. No, but I've been accused. She sat back, folded her arms, looked out the window. The world outside hadn't changed. It was still wet, cold, uncaring. But in here, with syrup stains and second chances, something felt slightly warmer. All right, she said finally, but I'm sitting by the door. And if you do anything sketchy, I'm kicking you in the throat. Deal, Elon said, standing. As they stepped out into the night, the rain had thinned to a whisper. Emily pulled her hoodie tighter. Elon unlocked a sleek black SUV with a quiet beep. She hesitated, looked at the logo, then at him. Of course it's a Tesla, she muttered. Wouldn't be on brand otherwise. She got in, holding the seatbelt away from her belly before clicking it in. He started the engine. The screen lit up with quiet elegance, and a soft melody played from the speakers. So, she said, staring at the futuristic dash, are you going to fly me to the moon next? Elon glanced at her with a grin. Let's take it one miracle at a time. They drove off into the Los Angeles night, two unlikely souls connected by circumstance, trust, and a rainstorm. Neither of them knew yet how far this strange detour would go. But the story had begun. The tires crunched softly over the gravel driveway as Elon pulled up to a modest, two-bedroom house tucked in the shadow of a eucalyptus-lined cul-de-sac. From the outside, it looked like any other quiet suburban rental. Stucco walls, a small porch light that flickered uncertainly, and flower beds more overgrown than cared for. But wasn't just a house. It was one of several he quietly maintained across the country, tucked away from headlines and stock tickers. Emergency sanctuaries for those who had fallen through the cracks, people the world forgot, but he couldn't. Emily sat quietly in the passenger seat, her fingers fidgeting with a frayed thread on her sleeve. She had barely said a word since they left the diner. Elon didn't push. He'd long ago learned the value of silence, how it filled in the spaces words weren't ready for. He turned off the engine and looked over. We're here. She peered out the windshield, eyebrows raised. I thought you were taking me to a mansion with biometric scanners and robot butlers. Elon chuckled. Too cliché. This place has a toaster that barely works and a couch that eats remotes. But it's safe, and it's yours for now. Her eyes scanned the porch, the curtains drawn, the quiet. Who else is here? No one. Just you. He stepped out and walked up the short path, unlocking the door with a soft click. A porch light flickered again. She hesitated before opening her door and following him, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly. The inside was warm. Not grand or expensive, just thoughtfully simple. Neutral tones, a modest sofa, a small bookshelf, and a kitchen with a humming fridge and a stack of fresh groceries already waiting on the counter. Elon's assistant had been here earlier, preparing everything. He always texted her with a single word, activation, and she knew exactly what it meant. Emily lingered at the doorway, her eyes scanning the space. You do this often, she asked. Enough to know how to stock the fridge properly. She turned toward him. So I'm not the first. He shook his head. You're not the first, and hopefully not the last. There was no pride in his voice, just quiet responsibility. Emily wandered into the living room and pressed a hand to the arm of the couch, as if testing whether it was real. Then she walked toward the hallway. Which one's the bedroom? First door on the left. Bathrooms across from it. She disappeared down the hallway. Elon stayed in the living room, hands in his pockets, staring at the muted glow of the table lamp. Somewhere in the silence, a distant clock ticked. She returned a moment later, still quiet, but something about her posture had changed. Less guarded, less curled in. "It's actually nice," she said, "like a real place." He smiled faintly. "That's the idea." For a while, neither of them said anything. She moved to the kitchen, opened the fridge, then the cabinets, half expecting hidden cameras or a trapdoor. Instead, she found fresh milk, clean plates, prenatal vitamins, and a handwritten sticky note on a jar of peanut butter that read, "Extra crunchy just in case." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you keep a database on people's snack preferences?" "Just intuition," he said. "I'm told it's part of the genius package." She laughed once, short and surprised. "Well, your genius saved me from a night in the back of a bread truck." He looked at her, really looked. Not the way people glanced over her on the street or judged her stomach before her eyes. He looked like someone trying to understand the architecture of her story. "Why do you think no one stopped before tonight?" he asked. She exhaled through her nose. "Because when you look like me, tired, pregnant, and unpolished, you become invisible. Or worse, a problem." "You're not a problem." That's easy for a billionaire to say. She regretted at the moment it left her mouth. He didn't flinch. "You're right," he said evenly. "But sometimes it takes someone with too much to remember what not enough looks like." She didn't respond. Instead, she walked over to the couch and sat down slowly, one hand pressing into her back. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked, nodding toward the door. She paused. "No," she said, "but don't hover. I'm a professional non-hoverer." He moved toward the front door, pausing as he reached for the knob. "There's a cell phone on the counter. Prepaid. It has my number and my assistant's. You don't have to use it. But if something happens..." She nodded once. As he opened the door, she called out softly, "Elon." He turned. "Why do you keep doing this? These houses, these rescues?" He hesitated, then smiled, not with his mouth, but in that distant, weighty way that people do when carrying a story they're not quite ready to tell. "Because once someone did it for me." The door closed with a soft click behind him. Emily stared at it for a long time. Then she stood, walked back down the hallway, and entered the room again. It was small but clean. A single bed with a folded blanket at the foot, a soft reading lamp, and a framed picture of the moon landing above the dresser. She lay down slowly, one hand on her stomach. "Zoe," she whispered. "Or Noah. Whoever you are, we made it through one more night." The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. And on the other side of the city, Elon Musk drove alone under a streetlight-smeared sky, mind racing. Not with rockets, not with robots, but with a question he hadn't asked in a long time. What if helping her changes everything? The next evening arrived wrapped in golden twilight. Outside, the air smelled like jasmine and wet pavement, the last of the afternoon rain still clinging to the sidewalk. Inside a house, Emily stood barefoot in the kitchen, staring at the microwave like it owed her money. Elon had returned around 6, a brown paper bag from a nearby Mexican place tucked under his arm. He'd barely stepped into the living room when she'd taken it from him without a word and vanished into the kitchen. Now he watched from the couch as she dramatically punched buttons on the microwave, muttering to herself. "I'm just saying," she called out, "whoever decided burritos needed to be this hot in the middle but ice cold on the ends deserves to be on trial." Elon smiled. "You could sue the microwave manufacturer." She peeked around the corner. "Do you have one?" "I have several." "Of course you do." The microwave dinged, and she returned with a plate stacked with burritos, 2 wrapped in foil, 1 unwrapped and leaking cheese like it had survived an explosion. She dropped onto the other end of the couch and set the plate between them. "Help yourself, but not to this one," she said, pointing to the most mutilated burrito. "That's the sacred one." "Sacred?" "It has jalapenos, pineapple, and, don't judge me, strawberry jam." He blinked. "That's a war crime in 3 countries." She smirked. "Not if you're pregnant." Elon reached for the second burrito, peeling back the foil. I'm trusting your taste now. Bold move. He took a bite. Okay, this is either genius or madness. Both, she said proudly. That's the sweet spot. For a few minutes, all that could be heard was the soft rustling of foil and the occasional crunch of tortilla. Emily hummed as she devoured hers, alternating bites with sips of chocolate milk straight from a carton. She said between gulps, my cravings have gone through, like, 7 personality disorders. Elon raised an eyebrow. Examples. Week 12 was tuna on donuts. Week 16, I cried because I couldn't dip fries in toothpaste. And last week, I woke up at 3 a.m. convinced I needed to eat soap. He choked on a bite. Don't worry, she said quickly. I didn't, but I Googled it, and apparently it's a thing. Pica. Your brain gets all weird when you're growing a human. He nodded, genuinely fascinated. The body is wild. She gestured toward her stomach. Tell me about it. I feel like I'm smuggling a beach ball full of elbows. He laughed, a full, unguarded laugh that surprised even him. Emily grinned. You laugh more when you're not being Elon Musk. He looked at her, intrigued. And who am I being now? I don't know. Just a guy. One who brings weird burritos and doesn't make everything about Mars. That's fair, he said. I like this version too. Silence fell again, but this time it was filled with ease. The kind that didn't need filling. Elon leaned back, one arm resting on the couch's edge, while Emily adjusted a cushion behind her back. Do you miss being unknown? She asked suddenly. He blinked. You mean before all the companies? Yeah, before the fame. Before people turned you into whatever they think you are. He considered this for a moment. Sometimes, it's like being a lighthouse. Everyone sees the light, but no one asks if the guy inside is okay. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. He glanced at her. Do you? She ran a hand over her belly. People see this and assume they know everything about me. They think I'm reckless, or irresponsible, or that I deserve to suffer. Her voice cracked at the edges, but she didn't shy away. I made mistakes, sure, but I'm still here, still trying. You're more than a story someone else wrote about you, he said softly. She looked at him for a long time. Then, without thinking, she picked up a jalapeno from her burrito and flicked it at him. He flinched as it bounced off his hoodie. Did you just? Consider it my version of applause, she said, grinning. He picked up a pickle from the coffee table plate and tossed it back. You forget who has better aim. She caught it midair. You forget who's growing a ninja. They both laughed again, this time louder, Messier. The couch felt smaller now, the space between them no longer held by caution, but by something lighter. Trust, maybe? Or at least the beginning of it. Elon glanced at the wall clock. Do you want me to stay tonight? Or give you space? Emily leaned her head back against the cushion. Her eyes fluttered shut. I don't know. You being here doesn't feel weird anymore, but I'm still figuring out what does. He nodded. That's fair. She peeked at him with one eye open. You really don't have, like, Mars meetings or robot summits to attend? Probably, but tonight's about burritos and belly jokes. She smiled. I can work with that. The lamp beside them flickered once, then settled. Outside, the moon rose quietly over the street, indifferent to burrito sauces and pineapple jam cravings. But inside that small house, something sacred was forming, not dramatic, not loud, just a slow bond between two people who didn't expect to matter to each other. And yet, here they were. It started with a sharp gasp that sliced the silence. Elon had drifted off on the couch with a half-finished book balanced on his chest, the lamp still, glowing beside him. The air was still warm from the burritos and laughter, but the room had grown heavy with midnight hush. Then came the second gasp, louder, strained, almost like a sob. He jolted upright. Elon, came a voice from a hallway. Weak, wounded. He was on his feet instantly, the book tumbling to the floor without a sound. Emily was leaning against the doorframe of the guest room, her face pale, one hand braced against the wall, the other clutching her stomach. It hurts, she whispered. Something's wrong. Her legs buckled slightly, and he rushed forward, catching her just before she crumpled. Okay, we're going now. He grabbed the car keys and guided her gently out the door, one arm wrapped around her, steady but urgent. The SUV sprang to life, its electric hum slicing through the dead night air. Emily winced as she sat, and her breathing came in short, panicked bursts. "Try to stay calm," he said, trying to sound like he believed to himself. "We'll be there in 5. But internally, his thoughts were unraveling faster than he could catch them. Algorithms, timelines, trajectories. He was used to predicting outcomes, to knowing the margins of error. But this was chaos wrapped in a heartbeat. The hospital lights buzzed overhead, sterile and too bright, as he pushed the emergency room doors open with his shoulder. A nurse sprang up from behind the front desk as Emily stumbled in beside him, gripping her belly with shaking fingers. "She's 7 months pregnant," Elon said, voice clipped. "She's in pain." "Name?" the nurse asked, already walking toward the triage door. "Emily Rivera," Emily said through clenched teeth. The next moments blurred, blood pressure checks, oxygen monitors, whispers between nurses. Elon was told to wait outside the examination room. He hated that door, hated how it shut him out, how it reduced him from problem solver to powerless observer. He stood in the hallway, arms crossed tight across his chest, trying to stop his mind from spiraling. What if something was wrong with the baby? What if Emily needed surgery? What if? The door opened. A doctor in scrubs stepped out, clipboard in hand, eyes already scanning Elon's face for how much truth he could handle. "She's stable," he said, "but we're admitting her overnight for monitoring." What happened? Preterm contractions. Not full labor, but close. "We've stopped them for now, but the pregnancy is classified as high risk." Elon exhaled slowly. "Why?" The doctor hesitated. "There are a few factors: nutrition, stress, and prior complications." "Has she had consistent prenatal care?" Elon shook his head. "She's been on her own. She just came under my care yesterday." The doctor nodded, not asking further. "We'll do a full ultrasound, but she needs rest, fluids, and less emotional strain." Emotionally strained was an understatement. They allowed him in briefly. Emily lay in a hospital bed that looked too big for her, pale beneath thin blankets, a fetal monitor blinking softly beside her. Her hair was tangled. Her face was puffy from tears she hadn't shown. He sat in the chair beside her, elbows on his knees. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He looked up, confused. "Why are you apologizing?" "I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to make you responsible." "You didn't make me anything," he said. "I chose to be here." She stared at the ceiling. "You're not supposed to see me like this. Weak." He leaned forward. "That's not weakness. That's being human." A beat passed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I was so scared." He didn't speak. Instead, he reached for her hand, uncertainly at first, then more firmly when she didn't pull away. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "I've done things most people would call impossible," he said softly. "But this, seeing you like this, it's different." "How?" "I can't code my way out of it. I can't prototype or iterate or throw engineers at it. I just have to sit here and hope." She glanced at him. "You're not used to that, huh?" He shook his head. "Not even a little." A nurse entered with a soft knock. "We're moving her to a private room. She'll be resting for the night." Elon stood and helped adjust the blankets before stepping back. Emily looked up at him, her voice thick. "You don't have to stay." "I know, but could you?" He nodded. The nurse led him down the hallway to a small adjoining room with a chair beside the new bed, better lighting, and less noise. As they settled in, Emily slowly drifted into sleep, her breaths evening out, the tension in her body slowly releasing. Elon stayed up. He didn't check his phone, didn't scroll news, just sat in the dark, eyes fixed on the machine that echoed her heartbeat and the baby's. A quiet metronome of life and uncertainty. He realized then that he wasn't just helping a stranger. He was invested, deeply, emotionally, And that scared him more than any rocket launch ever had. Because for the first time in a long time, he couldn't predict what came next. The sky had turned the color of ash by morning, and the faint hum of the city outside was muffled by the thick hospital windows. Emily stirred slowly in the narrow bed, the monitor still tracing gentle peaks with each heartbeat, steady now. Her eyelashes fluttered open, and for a moment, she blinked at the sterile ceiling, unsure if the last 12 hours had been a dream. Then she turned her head. Elon was still there. He sat in the same chair by her bedside, elbows on his knees, hands clasped, eyes closed but not sleeping. A man used to handling crises at 30,000 feet was now navigating one entirely grounded and far more fragile. She cleared her throat softly. His eyes opened instantly, sharp but tired. "Morning," he said, voice low. "You stayed," she murmured, as if the fact still surprised her. "Of course." Emily adjusted herself slightly in the bed, groaning as she shifted weight off her side. The nurse had said she was stable, but she still felt like a glass waiting to be tipped over again. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Elon poured water from a plastic pitcher on the tray and handed her a cup. She took it slowly. "I should probably explain," she said finally. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, gently, with intention. "I was 16 when I met him," she began, staring at the ceiling. "Derek. He was older. Not by much, but enough to feel dangerous. You know the type. Says the right things, leans in like the world only exists if you're talking." Elon stayed quiet, just listening. "My parents hated him," she continued. "They said he was a loser. But that only made me want him more. And for a while, I really believed he loved me." She exhaled, the air shaky. "When I found out I was pregnant, he didn't even pretend to be shocked. He just stared at me and said, 'So, what are you going to do about it?' Like it was a problem I brought home, not a person we made." Elon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I didn't tell my parents right away. I kept trying to figure out a way to make it all disappear. Not the baby, just the mistake. I thought if I could fix it myself, maybe they wouldn't be so disappointed." Her voice dropped. "By the time I told them, I was already showing. My mom cried. My dad, he just stared at me like I wasn't even there." She blinked away tears that refused to fall. "We fought. For hours. Words I can't take back. Things I didn't mean. Or maybe I did. I don't know anymore." Elon's hands were still clasped, but his fingers were trembling slightly. "I told them I'd leave. That they didn't need to deal with my mess. And they didn't stop me. Not right away." She turned to look at him, then really look. And that's what stuck. Not the yelling. Not the tears. Just that no one said, "Stay." Elon swallowed. "Do you think they wanted you to go?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she whispered. "But they let me." Silence wrapped around them like fog. No beeping, no nurses, just the weight of a girl who had carried more than she was built for. "I've thought about going back," she added after a moment. "Dozens of times. But every time I pick up the phone, I freeze. What if they still don't want me? What if they don't care I'm carrying their grandchild?" "You don't know that," Elon said gently. "I do not know it either." He leaned back slightly in the chair. "You remind me of someone." She raised an eyebrow. "Me," he said. "A long time ago." Emily scoffed lightly. "I doubt that." "Not the pregnancy part," he added with a smile. "But the leaving. The feeling that if you disappear, maybe no one will notice. Or worse, maybe they'll be relieved." She nodded, surprised. "My father was difficult," he continued. "When I left South Africa, I had no idea what I was doing. Just that I had to get out. I didn't speak to him for years." "Do you now?" she asked. He paused. "No, and I've made peace with that. But I also had people who didn't let me vanish completely. That's what saved me." Emily looked down at her hands. "You think I should call them?" "I think," he said slowly, "that you deserve to be seen. Whatever that means for you." She wiped at the corner of her eye, almost annoyed by her own emotion. "It's stupid," she said. "I didn't want to be this girl. You know, the teenage mom, the runaway, the charity case. "You're not," Elon said simply. "Then what am I?" "You're someone who survived. That already makes you rare." She stared at him again, like she wasn't used to hearing things like that. For the first time, she smiled, but was small, uncertain, like a flower blooming too early in spring. "Thanks," she said. Elon stood, stretched slightly. "The nurse said you'll be discharged tomorrow, if all goes well." She nodded. "Do you want me to be there?" A beat. Then, "Yeah, I do." He nodded once, then walked to the door. Just before exiting, he turned back. "You don't owe anyone an apology for surviving, least of all yourself." And with that, he was gone, leaving her in the quiet hum of the hospital, alone but somehow less alone than she'd been in months. 3 days after the hospital scare, Emily was released with a new prescription, a list of dietary restrictions, and a stern warning to reduce her stress. She nodded obediently at the nurse, but privately wondered how one was supposed to not be stressed while growing a human and not knowing where to plant your feet next. Elon, however, had apparently decided to take the doctor's words as a personal challenge. The morning after her discharge, he showed up at the small house with an iced decaf latte, a paper bag of bagels, and a proposition. "I was thinking," he said, placing the breakfast on the table like it was a business pitch, "you need a proper crib." Emily squinted at him, still wrapped in a hoodie and blanket. "You say that like you know what a proper crib even looks like." He grinned. "I Googled things." "That's not comforting." But 30 minutes later, they were standing in the nursery aisle of a large baby store, Emily walking slowly with her hand on her lower back, Elon pushing an empty cart like it might explode at any moment. Rows of pastel-colored furniture stretched around them like some kind of retail fever dream. Cribs, rocking chairs, mobiles shaped like animals with unsettlingly wide eyes. Emily looked around, bemused. How is it that everything in this store smells like vanilla and existential dread? "Marketing," Elon replied. "It's designed to make you believe a $900 crib will make your child emotionally well-adjusted." "Will it?" "No, but it'll match your Pinterest board." She snorted, and he smiled quietly at the sound. It was rare, unguarded, real. They walked slowly down the aisle, inspecting cribs. Emily stopped in front of one with warm wood tones and minimalistic lines. "This one," she said. "It's simple. Feels calm." Elon checked the tag. "Some assembly required." "Of course." He added it to the cart, along with a mattress, 2 sets of tiny cloud-patterned sheets, and, on a spontaneous whim, a small stuffed elephant wearing a rocket helmet. Emily stared at it, arms crossed. "That's the most Elon Musk thing I've ever seen." "Admit it," he said. "It's got charm. It looks like it's about to give a TED Talk." He tossed it into the cart. Back at the house, Elon insisted on building the crib himself. "You sure you don't want me to help?" Emily asked, easing into the couch with a bowl of grapes. "I build rockets." "That's not a yes." He spread out the parts across the living room floor like a battlefield, wooden slats, bolts, one small Allen wrench, and an instruction sheet that appeared to have been designed by someone with a grudge against clarity. Emily watched him crouch over the parts like he was defusing a bomb. "Do you want music while you work?" she offered. "I can cue up some dramatic opera." Very funny. An hour passed, then another. The crib looked not like a crib, more like a confused bookshelf on its side. Emily tried to suppress her laughter. She failed. "You okay over there, Mr. Space Genius?" Elon, sweating slightly, turned the instructions upside down and squinted. "There are 3 screws labeled G17. I only have 2. Maybe one is quantum mechanical." He gave her a look. She burst out laughing again, louder this time. It was the first time in weeks her laughter didn't sound hollow. Finally, he dropped the Allen wrench and slumped against the half-assembled frame. "All right, I surrender." Emily stood slowly, belly first, and shuffled over to sit beside him. "Can I tell you something?" she said after a beat. "Only if it doesn't involve mocking my engineering skills." "No promises." He smiled, but turned serious as she continued. "I didn't think I'd feel safe again. Not really. Not like this." He looked at her, really looked. "You are safe," he said. "And I didn't think I'd trust anyone again either," she added, softer now. "But you're kind in a way that doesn't feel like charity." He nodded once, accepting the compliment not as praise, but as responsibility. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Just for a second, just enough to say what words still struggled to. "I guess you're not terrible at this whole human connection thing," she muttered. "And you're not terrible at pretending my crib isn't a disaster." They sat there in silence, a mess of bolts and slats around them, two people building something bigger than furniture, something that didn't come with instructions. Eventually, he stood and said, "I'm calling him backup. There's a person at Tesla who builds complex things with impossible instructions." "Another engineer?" "No," he said, pulling out his phone. "A grandmother from accounting." Emily laughed again as he dialed. Later that night, after the crib was finally standing, thanks to Beverly from accounting, who took one look at the mess and muttered, "Men." Emily lay on the couch, staring at the tiny mobile of planets Elon had bought and hung crookedly over the crib. He sat nearby, typing something into his phone, probably sending rockets to space while eating crackers. She watched him for a moment. "Elon." He looked up. "Thanks. For today. Not just for the crib, but for making something normal out of this." He nodded once, eyes warm. "It's been a while since I built something that didn't explode." They smiled at each other. A shared understanding. A quiet bond. And in that moment, with a half-tilted mobile spinning above an empty crib and laughter still lingering in the air, Emily realized something that made her heart ache, but in the best way. She wasn't alone anymore. The day after their visit to SpaceX, Emily sat on the porch of a small house Elon had provided, her phone gripped tightly in both hands. The morning sun pressed gently through the clouds, casting long lines of golden light across the sidewalk, but none of it reached her expression. She had already dialed 3 times. No answer. Again, she pressed the call button. The screen lit up, "Mom," and the line rang. Once, twice, then voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Lisa Rivera. Leave a message and I'll get back to you." The beep was like a slap. Emily stared at the phone for a full 10 seconds before ending the call. Elon watched her from the kitchen window, unseen. He didn't move, didn't breathe too loud, afraid that even the creak of a floorboard might disturb what looked like a fragile negotiation between hope and despair. Emily set the phone in her lap and exhaled, long and shaky. Her free hand rested on her belly, fingers unconsciously rubbing small, slow circles. Later, when she walked back inside, he was seated at the small dining table with 2 mugs of tea. She didn't say anything. He didn't ask. They sat in silence. "You'd think after all this time," she finally muttered, "they'd want to know I'm alive." Elon traced his finger around the rim of the mug. Sometimes silence isn't absence. It's fear, or confusion, or guilt. She looked at him. "That's supposed to help." "No," he said softly. "It's just what I've learned." She dropped into the chair across from him. "When I left, I didn't leave angry. I left because I thought it would be easier. For them. For me. But now, even if I wanted to go back, I don't even know if there's a door." He nodded slowly. "Do you want me to help find out?" Her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I have people," he said carefully. "Discreet ones. They can help check on things without disrupting anything. Just to make sure." Emily hesitated. Her instinct said no, said it was too invasive, too cold. But another part of her, the one that had slept under delivery trucks and walked streets she couldn't name, told her it was time to stop pretending she didn't need help. "Okay," she said finally, "but nothing weird. No drones. No satellites." "No drones," he echoed, smiling faintly. "Just a woman named Dana with a notebook and an old Corolla." That afternoon, Elon stepped into a shaded corner of his private office in the city and tapped out a quick message on Signal. "Elon, can you check on Lisa and Mark Rivera? No pressure on the ground. Just find out if they're safe. Quietly. Dana, got it. I'll circle back tonight." Emily spent most of the evening on the couch, alternating between watching a cooking competition and pretending she wasn't constantly glancing at her phone. Every ring, every ping that wasn't from her parents felt like another confirmation they weren't trying. Elon returned around 8 p.m., carrying takeout and a small white orchid in a ceramic pot. She raised an eyebrow. "You bring a plant to every emotional crisis." He shrugged. They don't argue back. She smirked and cleared space on the coffee table. "It's cute. What's its name?" "Jupiter Jr." She laughed, really laughed this time, and for a brief moment, it was enough to make the rest fade. Then her phone buzzed. She snatched it up. Unknown number. Her eyes locked on Elon's. He stood still, unreadable. She answered. "Hello." Silence. Then a soft click. Call ended. She stared at the screen, heart pounding. "What was it?" Elon asked. "Just nothing." She hesitated. "Or someone who hung up." His face darkened ever so slightly. People don't call by accident anymore. Before she could reply, his own phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, Dana. He stepped outside to answer. Emily sat, the orchid watching her like a quiet witness. Her fingers trembled. Outside, the wind was picking up, rustling leaves along the driveway. Elon answered, voice low. "Talk to me." Dana's voice was calm and clipped. "I found the house. No one's there." "What do you mean?" "I mean it's empty. Looked like it's been that way for weeks. Mail piling up. One of the neighbors said they haven't seen the Riveras since early last month. Said there was some kind of accident." Elon's stomach dropped. "What kind of accident?" "I'm checking. But Elon, I don't think they just stopped answering their daughter." He closed his eyes. "Keep digging." When he returned inside, Emily looked up instantly. "You found something." He hesitated. "I don't know yet," he said, and he meant it. "But we're looking. Carefully." She searched his face. "You're not telling me something." "I'm not making promises," he said gently. "But I am staying." She stared at him for a moment, then nodded once, sharp, grateful, afraid. And in the space between them, filled with tea, takeout, and blooming orchids, something unspoken passed. A vow, not in words, but in the way he stayed standing even when she looked away. In the way she didn't have to ask. He was going to see this through. All the way. The building looked like something out of a science fiction film. Massive, sleek, humming with quiet purpose. The polished concrete floors of SpaceX's Hawthorne facility reflected the overhead lights like a runway to somewhere unimaginable. As the security gate opened and Elon's black SUV rolled through, Emily leaned forward in her seat, eyes wide and curious. "You weren't kidding," she whispered. "This place is huge." "Wait until you see the rockets," Elon said, smirking. "They're even bigger." She gave him a look. "I've seen pictures. I know what a rocket looks like." "You haven't seen my rockets." He said it so casually, it took her a second to realize how ridiculous it sounded. She burst into laughter. "Oh my God, do you flirt with all the women you bring to your launch pads?" "I don't bring people here," he said, pulling into a reserved spot near the entrance. "Only you." The tone in his voice caught her off guard, soft, direct, real. She didn't know how to respond to that, so she let silence do the talking. Inside, the air felt different, charged, alive. Engineers moved briskly across walkways in dark blue polos. White boards were crowded with sketches and formulas, and beyond the glass walls stood a towering Falcon 9 booster, half-assembled and majestic even in stillness. Emily followed Elon through a side hallway that led to a viewing platform above the main assembly floor. She leaned against the glass, eyes fixed on the massive machine below. "It looks like a sleeping giant," she said, awestruck. "Pretty close," Elon replied. "That one's going to carry a satellite network to low Earth orbit. Reusable. Fully automated return sequence. We're getting better at not blowing them up." She glanced at him. "How many times did you fail before you got it right?" He didn't look away from the rocket. "Too many to count. I lost one on ascent. Another crashed trying to land. The third one didn't even get off the ground. People call me crazy. Investors pulled out. My team thought about quitting. So why didn't you? Because I could see it, he said simply. The idea, the future. I knew it was possible. I just hadn't figured out how yet. Emily stared at the gleaming metal body of the rocket, trying to imagine what it took to believe in something no one else could see. That sounds terrifying, she said. It was. And exhausting. Also true. She leaned on the railing, one hand resting on her belly. You know, this baby feels a little like that. He turned toward her, curious. I mean, think about it, she said. It started as an idea, unexpected, kind of inconvenient. And now it's this huge thing growing inside me that I don't fully understand, but I have to keep going because I know it's worth something, even when it scares me. He was quiet for a long moment. That might be the most accurate comparison I've ever heard. Emily smiled softly. I used to think being pregnant meant giving up everything, freedom, future, identity. But now, I don't know. Maybe it's like launching a rocket. You don't lose the parts. They just change form. He nodded slowly, visibly moved. Exactly. They stood there in silence for a moment, two unlikely souls overlooking a dream wrapped in steel and ambition. Come on, he said gently. There's more. He led her down to the prototype lab. Along the way, they passed a room filled with what looked like thousands of wires, tubes, and silicone panels. Emily paused. What is all this? Thermal protection systems, outer shell material. Think of it as the rocket skin. She ran a hand along one of the silicone tiles, cool and smooth under her fingers. You build skin for rockets? Technically, yes. She smirked. Do you ever stop and realize how weird your life is? All the time. They entered a glass-walled chamber where a test rocket stood in upright position, bathed in golden light from above. Around it, workstations hummed quietly, and screens displayed simulated trajectories and fuel burn rates. Emily's mouth dropped open slightly. You seriously just build space machines on a Tuesday? Actually, it's Thursday. Still. He handed her a small, cylindrical piece of metal. That's a grid fin. It helps steer the rocket as it returns. She turned it over in her hand, marveling at its weight and texture. It feels so intentional. It has to be. There's no room for random in space. She looked at him. But life is random. He shrugged. That's why I build rockets. So I can feel like something isn't. Her voice softened. Is that why you helped me? So you could fix something random? He met her gaze, and for a moment, the room fell away. No, he said. I help you because, for once, the randomness mattered. She looked down at the metal in her hand. You ever name one of these? Of course. Falcon, Starship, Dragon. Dragon, she laughed. That's dramatic. Hey, if you're going to the stars, might as well sound cool doing it. She grinned. Maybe I'll name the baby after a planet. Jupiter. Too much gas. They both laughed. And for a moment, surrounded by the most complex machines on Earth, everything felt wonderfully, impossibly simple. As they walked back to the car, Emily took one last glance over her shoulder at the rocket bay. You know, she said, I think this was the first time I saw something bigger than my fear. Elon looked at her. You're carrying something even bigger. She touched her belly, then nodded slowly. And in the reflection of the glass doors as they stepped outside, there they were, two people building lives from impossible blueprints, holding onto ideas that had no guarantee. But maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The invitation wasn't formal. In fact, it wasn't even a real invitation. It was a text message from Elon with only 3 words. Wear something comfy. Emily had expected something low-key, maybe lunch at one of Elon's quieter offices, a chance to take her mind off the eerie silence surrounding her parents. But what she walked into that afternoon at the SpaceX employee lounge was nothing short of bewildering. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a large, glass-walled room bathed in natural light and scattered with colorful streamers, metallic balloons shaped like stars, and a banner above the central table that read, "Welcome, baby star." Emily froze. About 24 people turned at once, engineers, assistants, technicians, smiling at her with a mixture of awkward excitement and genuine warmth. Some held paper plates, others awkwardly balanced cups of punch. A few clapped. One guy in the back whistled like they were welcoming royalty. Her eyes darted toward Elon, who stood beside her in a dark charcoal blazer over his usual hoodie, trying to look casual and failing miserably. "What is this?" she whispered. "A highly inefficient use of aerospace-grade mines," he murmured, "but totally worth it." She blinked, overwhelmed. "You planned this." "I gave them the idea," he said. "They did the rest." That's when she noticed the details. A table piled high with small wrapped gifts, blankets, tiny onesies, a plush rocket embroidered with future astronaut, a cake in the shape of a space capsule with pink and blue icing accents, a onesie hanging like a trophy on the wall, printed with the words "payload on board." Emily's throat tightened. One of the engineers, a woman in her 40s with a braid down to her waist, walked over, holding a cupcake tray shaped like a launch pad. "I'm Sheila," she said kindly. "I helped design the landing gear on Falcon 9. But this is the most important mission I've supported all year." Emily opened her mouth to say something, but only a choked breath came out. She nodded instead, wiping the corner of her eye with the sleeve of her hoodie. Someone handed her a chair. Someone else passed a plate of snacks. And just like that, she was surrounded by strangers who didn't know her story, who weren't there because they had to be, but because they chose to. Because she mattered, even if they'd only just learned her name. Games were played. One involved guessing the baby's due date by calculating orbital decay. She didn't get the joke, but Elon laughed so hard he almost dropped his juice. Another involved building makeshift baby toys out of lab scraps. Someone actually soldered a music box that played a lullaby rendition of Rocket Man. Emily laughed. A lot. At one point, she even forgot about her phone resting in her pocket, silent as ever. It wasn't until the end, when the group began to disperse, that Elon approached her with a small black box in his hand. She blinked, wary. "What's that?" "Just a little something," he said. "No pressure. It's not from SpaceX. It's from me." She opened the lid. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a small, circular pendant shaped like a compass, with the word North engraved in the center. Her breath caught in her chest. On the reverse side, in tiny lettering, it read, "To the strongest mother I know." She looked up at him, mouth trembling. "Elon, I know I can't fix everything," he said quietly, "but I wanted you to have something that reminds you where you're going, not where you came from." Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. Instead, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, the kind of hug that wasn't rehearsed or careful. It was messy, raw, real. He hugged her back. When she pulled away, tears glimmered on her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she whispered. A few of the remaining employees clapped, mistaking the moment for a formal conclusion. Emily laughed, brushing away the tears. She looked around the room one more time, at the clutter of gift bags, the crumpled napkins, the half-eaten cake, and for the first time since her world had unraveled, she felt like she wasn't a problem to be solved or a burden to be tolerated. She was part of something. Elon walked her out to the car later that afternoon, the bracelet still glinting on her wrist in the setting sun. "You okay?" he asked, opening her door. "I think I am," she said. Weirdly. He smiled. "That's allowed." She settled into the seat. "Do you do this often?" "What? Host baby showers in aerospace lounges?" "No," she said. "Make people feel like they belong again." His smile faded into something more introspective. "I try," he said. "Sometimes that's enough." As they drove off, Emily watched the SpaceX building disappear in the rearview mirror, the banner barely visible through the window glass. "Welcome, baby star." It lingered in her mind like a benediction. She touched the compass on her wrist and whispered, "We're finding our way." And for the first time in a long time, she believed it. The morning after the baby shower felt unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after something beautiful, like the hush after a song that lingers too long in your chest. Emily had slept with the bracelet still around her wrist, curled in the fetal position on the couch, a half-folded baby onesie resting beside her like guardian. Elon stood in the kitchen, pouring water into the electric kettle, staring blankly as steam began to rise. He hadn't slept. Not really. The message had come in just after midnight, Dana's report. He'd read it twice, then a third time, and still it hadn't sunk in. Both Lisa and Mark Rivera were declared deceased following a vehicular accident on the 405 freeway. Date: 3.5 weeks ago. Fatal on impact. No surviving passengers. Car registered to Mark Rivera. Verified by hospital records and police report. No funeral announced. No funeral. No word. No one to tell Emily. He gripped the edge of the counter as the kettle whined behind him. For all his intelligence, for all his calculated risk-taking and impossible successes, this felt like staring into an emotional black hole. He wanted to fix it, rewrite it, launch time backward, and reroute the accident before it ever happened. But there was no launch sequence for this. No abort button. Just truth and the burden of when and how to deliver it. "Morning," Emily mumbled, shuffling in from the hallway in her oversized hoodie and mismatched socks. Elon turned too quickly. "Morning. I made tea." She gave him a sleepy half-smile. "You always make tea when you look stressed." He handed her a mug, avoiding her eyes. "That obvious?" She took it, sipped slowly. "Something's wrong." He didn't answer. Emily walked to the couch and sat down. The silence between them stretched too long. "Elon," she said softly, "did you find something?" He froze. 1,000 responses raced through his mind. Some honest, some evasive. All of them fragile. "I did," he said finally. Her fingers curled around the mug. "Okay." His voice was gentler than usual. "Dana confirmed something. About your parents." Emily sat upright, suddenly alert. He knelt beside the coffee table, closer to her. His face was drawn, his tone somber. "There was an accident," he said, "a few weeks ago. On the freeway." Her eyes locked on his. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "I'm so sorry, Emily." She stared at him, unmoving. Then her eyes darted to the bracelet on her wrist, then to the ceiling, as if trying to outrun the words. "Both?" she asked, her voice cracking. He nodded. "Yes." She blinked. Once. Twice. And then the tears came, not loud or sudden, but slow, as if her body couldn't comprehend the news fast enough. "I didn't get to say goodbye," she whispered. "They thought I hated them." Elon reached forward, placing a hand on hers. "They didn't think that. People don't stop loving their children, even when it gets hard." She turned her face away, pressing a sleeve against her eyes. "I should have called earlier. I should have." Her voice broke. "There's nothing you could have done," he said firmly. "Nothing." She cried harder then, not just for the news, but for the guilt, the confusion, the longing that had nowhere to go now. It all poured out. Elon sat with her in the silence, not speaking, not fixing, just being there, present, like gravity, like a lighthouse. When her tears slowed, she looked up, face red and puffy. "I don't even know where they are," she said, "where they were buried. If anyone showed up, if they even knew about the baby." He nodded. "We'll find out. I'll take care of it." Her lip trembled. "Why are you doing all this for me?" He didn't answer immediately. "Because it's right," he could have said. "Because you remind me of someone. Because I wish someone had done the same for me." Instead, he said, "Because you're not alone anymore." She stared at him for a long time, and something in her broke, but not in a way that left her shattered. It was the kind of breaking that lets the light in. "You're the closest thing I have to family right now," she whispered. He swallowed. "Then that's what I'll be." They didn't hug. Not yet. But the space between them shifted. It changed shape. Later that afternoon, Elon called his assistant and quietly made arrangements. For funeral records, for closure. For anything Emily might need, but didn't have the strength to ask for. That night, he made dinner grilled cheese and tomato soup, and she actually managed to laugh at the way he burned the first sandwich and blamed the pan. They watched a documentary on whales. No reason, just background noise. And when she fell asleep on the couch, curled around a throw pillow, Elon placed a folded blanket over her and sat back down beside her. In that moment, watching her breathe, watching her chest rise and fall, he knew something irrevocable had changed. He wasn't just helping her anymore. He was protecting her. And no matter what came next, he wouldn't let her face it alone. The kitchen was dimly lit, the only light coming from a small pendant lamp hanging over the table. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the hush of a world that felt a little too quiet. Emily sat across from Elon, her fork absently pushing mashed potatoes across her plate. She hadn't taken more than 2 bites. Elon had cooked, sort of. The roasted chicken and sides had been mostly prepared by his assistant and discreetly delivered, but he had plated it himself, every portion aligned like a launch configuration. It was his way of offering normalcy, of telling her she still deserved dinners that felt like home. Emily sipped from her glass of water and looked at him with a kind of wary calm. "You're doing that thing again," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "What thing?" "That thing where you look like you're calculating trajectory mid-conversation. Something's on your mind." He paused. His eyes dropped to his plate. The fork in his hand didn't move. "Emily," he said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you." Her stomach tensed. She set her glass down carefully. "This about my parents?" He nodded. Her expression didn't change much, just the faintest narrowing of her eyes. She leaned back in her chair, waiting. "I've known for a few days," Elon began. "I asked someone on my team to quietly investigate when you couldn't get through to them." Emily's breath caught in her throat. He continued, steady but soft. "They died. In a car crash. 3.5 weeks ago. Both of them. It was instant. No suffering." The silence that followed was immense. Emily stared at him, her hands frozen in place on either side of her plate. Her eyes didn't blink. They didn't move. For a long time, she just sat in the stillness, letting the words settle in her bones. Then she whispered, "You already told me that." He looked up, startled. "I told you they died, yes. But I didn't tell you. I knew before you asked. I kept it from you." A beat passed. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then slowly, her brows knit together. "Why?" "Because I wasn't sure how to say it," he replied, voice low. "And because I didn't want to be the reason your world collapsed." She looked down at her plate, then back at him. "You thought protecting me meant lying to me." "I didn't lie," he said. "I delayed." "That's worse," she said, but her tone lacked venom. It was too hollow for anger. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "I was trying to give you space. Time to be happy, at least for a little while. The baby shower, the peace, even just one day, without another emotional blow." Emily nodded slowly. Her eyes glistened, but her voice was steady. "You thought I'd break." "I was afraid you would," he admitted. A long silence followed. Then, to his surprise, Emily stood. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just walked over to the sink, placed her untouched plate inside, and rested both hands on the edge of the counter. Her back was to him, her shoulders stiff. "I don't need to be protected from pain, Elon," she said quietly. "I've lived with it long enough to know it won't kill me." He stood too, hesitant. "I know. I see that now." Still facing away, she added, "What hurts more than knowing they're gone is knowing that you didn't trust me to handle it." He felt the words like a weight settling in his chest. "I'm sorry," he said. She nodded once, then turned to face him. Her face was damp now, not with the violent tears of before, but something quieter. Resolved. "You want to know the truth," she said. He didn't speak, just waited. "I keep thinking about how I left them. How I said horrible things when I walked out. How I thought they'd call and beg me to come back, and when they didn't, I told myself it meant they didn't care." Her voice cracked. "But maybe they were trying. Maybe they never got the chance. And now I'll never know." Elon took a step forward. "You don't need to carry that guilt. It's not yours. Yes, it is, she said, but it's not going to define me. He stopped, taken aback. I'm not going to let this ruin me, she said firmly. And I'm not going to let my kid grow up thinking they were unwanted or unloved. I'll tell them everything, the good, the bad, and how they were born out of chaos but raised in strength. She touched her belly, her fingers resting gently against the curve. This baby won't grow up alone, she said. Not like I did. Not like I feared I would. Elon's voice came softly. You're not alone either. She met his eyes, and this time she didn't look away. No, she said, I'm not. There was a new energy in the air, less like mourning and more like resolution. She wasn't collapsing. She was rebuilding, brick by quiet brick. That night, as they sat side by side on the couch watching muted news footage of a SpaceX rocket preparing for launch, Emily reached over and took Elon's hand without a word. He squeezed back gently. No more secrets, only forward. It was 3:14 a.m. when it began, not with a scream, not with a cinematic gush of water, but with a single sharp inhale. Emily sat up in bed with a jolt, clutching her side. For a moment, she thought maybe it was just another Braxton Hicks contraction. False labor, a muscle cramp, anything but the real thing. Then it hit again. Lower, harder, a pressure like someone was slowly wringing her entire abdomen out like a wet towel. Elon, she called, her voice tight. Down the hallway, he was already awake, reading on his tablet in the dim light of the living room. He dropped it instantly and ran to her room barefoot, hoodie half-zipped, hair vaguely resembling an electrical incident. What happened? He asked, eyes wild. Is it the baby? Are you okay? Emily took a sharp breath. It's happening. For a second, he blinked like the words didn't compute. Then she added, I'm in labor. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. I'll get the car. The house turned into a frenzy. Elon grabbed a go bag she had packed weeks earlier, but also inexplicably tossed in a first aid kit, 3 power banks, and a SpaceX ID badge. Why would the baby need your security clearance? She gasped mid-contraction as he rushed past her. You never know. What if they ask who authorized this launch? Elon, the only launch happening is from my uterus. He froze. Right. Focus. The SUV peeled out of the driveway moments later, windshield wipers fighting early morning drizzle as the city of Los Angeles slept on. In the passenger seat, Emily breathed in and out, one hand gripping the edge of the armrest, the other clenching Elon's hoodie sleeve. Left at the next light, she said through gritted teeth. You're not on autopilot now. Right. No AI. Just human terror, he muttered. As they turned onto the main road, another contraction hit, this one long and low, like a fault line cracking. Elon, she hissed, if you quote rocket physics right now, I will physically eject you from this vehicle. I wasn't going to wait, maybe a little. Don't. Understood. Halfway to the hospital, she suddenly tensed. Elon, pull over. His eyes went wide. What? Why? I think my water broke. What? Are you sure it wasn't just, condensation? She gave him a look that could have frozen rocket fuel. He pulled into a gas station parking lot, jumped out, ran to her side, and opened the door. She was soaked through the back of her leggings, her face pale. I've seen launches. I've calculated risk margins. I've stared into the void of space, Elon muttered as he helped her out, but I have never, ever, dealt with amniotic fluid. You thought it was propellant, didn't you? No, he said quickly. I mean, only for a second. Then I remembered that propellant doesn't come in maternity leggings. Emily laughed so hard she had to grab the roof of the car for balance. Okay, she said. Okay, we're fine. Just drive. At the hospital entrance, Elon flung open the emergency doors and marched inside like he was launching a billion-dollar payload. She's in labor, he shouted to the front desk nurse. Real labor. Like biological human labor. And she's leaking. The nurse blinked. You mean her water broke? Yes, that. But dramatically. Emily walked in slowly behind him, rolling her eyes but smiling through the pain. He means it's go time. They were whisked into a triage room, vitals checked, and very quickly reassigned to a delivery suite. Everything escalated with a speed Emily hadn't expected. Monitors beeped. Nurses spoke in calm but clipped tones. Elon paced like a caged animal. "How are you doing?" he asked, hovering as a nurse inserted an IV into Emily's arm. She gritted her teeth through another wave of pain. "I feel like my spine is collapsing into a black hole." He leaned in. "Do you want music? I brought a speaker. Unless that speaker delivers an epidural, keep it in your hoodie." "Copy that." 2 hours later, the contractions were closer, sharper, and Emily was gripping the bed rails like they were all that tethered her to earth. Her hair clung to her face. Her breathing came in rhythmic bursts, coached by a nurse. Elon sat beside her, one hand resting near hers, unsure if she wanted to hold it or break it. "You're doing great," he whispered. "No, I'm not," she grunted. "I'm swearing and sweating and yelling at nurses." "I mean, that's how most astronauts react during re-entry." That earned a weak laugh. She turned to him between contractions. "Promise me something. Anything. That you'll be in his life." He blinked. "Of course. Even if I mess up. Even if I lose it sometimes. Be his North Star." His chest tightened. He nodded. "I swear." She looked away, blinking rapidly. "Good. Because he deserves to be loved by someone who chose to stay." He squeezed her hand gently. "Then he's in the right room." When the doctor finally said it was time to push, Elon had never felt more useless, but also never more in awe. And as the minutes stretched into intensity and Emily bore down with everything she had, he thought of all the things he'd seen. Rockets pierce the sky, robots mimic human hands, machines whisper in Martian air. None of it compared to the moment a cry filled the room and a new life entered the world. Tiny, red, loud, perfect. Elon stood still as the nurse cleaned and wrapped the baby, then turned to Emily. "You did it," he whispered. Tears streaked her cheeks as she cradled the newborn against her chest. "I didn't do it alone." He sat beside her, looked down at the baby. The future had a face now, and it was looking straight at him. The room had fallen still. Not silent, but still. The kind of stillness that followed a storm, where the air felt thick with emotion and something sacred lingered in the walls. The harsh overhead lights had been dimmed, and only the soft monitor beeps and the distant shuffle of nurses filled the quiet. In Elon's arms, Noah blinked. Tiny, swaddled, unbelievably real. Elon had held technology that could land itself on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean. He had spoken to astronauts in orbit and engineers designing propulsion systems for other planets. But this was delicate. He looked down at the newborn, eyes wide, cheeks red, fingers twitching slightly outside the blanket. Noah had finally stopped crying, soothed only by warmth and the steady thump of Elon's heartbeat, something completely unprogrammable. The nurse who'd cleaned and wrapped the baby smiled gently. "He's small," she said, "but strong. His lungs are fine. No NICU required." Elon nodded, not taking his eyes off the child. "He's perfect." The nurse chuckled. "That's one word for it." Another nurse, a woman in her early 30s with tired but kind eyes, stepped closer. "Do you mind if I take a picture? This moment's worth remembering." Elon glanced toward Emily, asleep now in a hospital bed, her face pale but peaceful, hair stuck to her forehead, mouth slightly open. Her hand still rested protectively over where her belly had once been. He looked back down at Noah and nodded. "Sure, just one." She lifted her phone. Click. The shutter was soft, but the flash caught a glint in Elon's eyes. Later, she would upload it to the hospital's secure file system and mark it private, patient authorized only. But in that moment, she looked at the screen and saw something she hadn't expected. Elon Musk smiling like a man who just landed on Mars again, except this time the planet had a name. Noah. Elon returned to the chair beside Emily's bed, moving carefully so as not to wake her. She'd done everything, brought this tiny person into the world through blood and fire and grit. And now, she slept like a warrior who had fought, won, and finally let go. He glanced at the digital clock on the wall, 4:58 a.m. The sun hadn't risen yet, but it was close. He looked down at Noah again, who had started to stir. A soft whimper, a yawn so large it seemed to consume his whole face, then a high-pitched, stuttering wail. The first real cry, sharp, demanding, alive. Elon rocked slightly in the chair, instinct taking over without instruction. Hey, it's okay. You're here. You made it. The crying softened. The baby's eyes opened for a moment, unfocused, cloudy blue. I don't know if I'm qualified for this, Elon whispered. You're not a robot. You don't have code. I can't debug you. Noah responded with a hiccup. But I'm here, he added, and I'm not leaving. He hadn't planned on saying those words, but the second he did, they anchored something inside him. A decision, a vow. Emily stirred a few minutes later. A soft moan escaped her lips, her head turning slightly. Elon leaned forward and whispered, he's here. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. He's. Elon smiled. Say hello to Noah. The nurse stepped over to help adjust the bed, raising her into a gentle recline. Elon stood and slowly handed the baby to her, watching as her arms instinctively formed a cradle. The look on her face as she saw him, really saw him, made Elon's throat tighten. Oh my God, she whispered, breath hitching. He's so small. And loud, Elon added. Emily looked up at him, eyes glassy with emotion. You held him first. I did, he admitted, and I didn't drop him. So that's progress. She smiled through tears. Of course you didn't. You've been holding this whole thing together since the moment I asked for help. He shook his head. You held yourself together. I just showed up. She reached out and touched his hand, letting her fingers rest there for a long moment. He looks like me, she said. He's lucky. Emily looked back down at her son, now sleeping again in her arms, his tiny face nestled against her chest. I was so scared, she whispered. Every day. I thought I'd fail before I even got to meet him. Elon pulled a chair closer and sat down beside her. You didn't fail. You survived. And now he's here, because you never gave up. She looked over at him again, her face softer now. You're part of this too, you know, she said. Not just today. All of it. He nodded, feeling that same ache in his chest again, an emotion he rarely named. I know. They sat like that for a long while, just the three of them. The city beginning to stir outside. The early morning light starting to creep through the edges of the blinds. Eventually, the nurse returned and asked if they'd like a bassinet brought in. Emily hesitated, then looked at Elon. Would you mind holding him again? Just while they set it up. He held out his arms without a word, and she gently transferred Noah to him. Elon stood there for a moment, baby in arms, watching the nurse unfold the small crib. He's heavier than I expected, he said. Emily smiled from the bed. Yeah, that's what love feels like. He looked down at the baby again, breathing, wriggling, utterly dependent, and for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk understood what it meant to be grounded. Not by gravity, but by connection, by responsibility, by love. And as Noah shifted slightly in his arms, letting out a tiny sigh, Elon whispered, "Welcome to Earth." 2 weeks after Noah was born, the world felt different. Not louder, not calmer, just changed. Emily stood barefoot in the center of a small, sunlit living room, her newborn bundled against her chest in a soft sling, rising and falling with each of her breaths. The baby was asleep, a peaceful weight she hadn't realized she could carry until now. The house smelled like wood polish and freshly laundered sheets. Morning light spilled across the hardwood floors, catching on a mobile above the crib in the corner, planets and stars slowly turning like they had all the time in the universe. Outside, a wind chime danced gently in the breeze. You sure it's not too much? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Behind her, Elon leaned against the open kitchen doorway, hands in the pockets of a casual blazer. He looked strangely out of place, like a billionaire had wandered into a cozy home catalog and decided to stay a while. "It's exactly the right amount," he said. Emily turned slowly, shifting Noah slightly. "It's not just the house." He nodded, understanding. "The offer." She hesitated. "The job, the support, the everything." The night before, he had shown her a neatly printed folder with her name on it. Inside, documents for a remote administrative role with flexible hours, full medical benefits, and a modest but permanent salary. Alongside it was a deed to a small house just outside the city, paid in full, utilities pre-covered for a year, and a handwritten note that simply said, "This isn't charity. It's trust." "I'm not used to this," Emily admitted, brushing her hand through her now tied back hair. "People don't usually give me things unless they expect something." "I don't," Elon said. "But why?" Her voice wasn't accusatory, just tired. "Vulnerable. You've already done so much." He took a step into the room, sunlight catching in the silver threads near his temples. "Because I see what you're building, what you fought for, what you carried alone for too long, and because I believe in investing in things that matter." Emily's eyes shimmered. "This house," he added, "isn't just shelter. It's a declaration. You're not surviving anymore. You're living." A silence settled between them. Then Noah stirred softly, sighing in his sleep. Emily chuckled under her breath. "He sounds like a tired old man." "He's a tired old man," Elon said, smiling. "He just doesn't know it yet." She walked to the window, looking out over the small backyard. A modest garden bed, a worn fence, a single redwood sapling staked in the corner. "I always thought I'd be somewhere like this," she said. "Before everything. Not fancy, just mine." "Is yours now," Elon said, "and no one can take it from you." She turned back toward him. "You thought of everything." He gave a half shrug. "It's a habit." Then, softer, "I never really had a home that felt like mine either. Too many ceilings that belonged to other people." Emily nodded. "That's why you keep trying to build new ones, even on other planets." He looked at her for a long moment, surprised by how true that felt. "You know," she added, adjusting the sling gently, "I used to think strength meant not needing anyone. Now I think it's knowing when to say yes." Elon stepped closer, slower this time. "Then what's your answer?" Emily looked down at Noah, then at the walls of her new life. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was trespassing in someone else's kindness. "I accept," she said. No grand gesture, no handshake, just the truth. And something in Elon's chest quietly cracked. Not from sadness, from release. From witnessing the moment someone chose themselves and let you help without shame. He reached out and gently touched her shoulder. A gesture too subtle for the world to notice, but too powerful for either of them to forget. She looked up. He blinked, and they both realized they were crying. Not sobbing, not breaking, just crying. The kind of tears that come from gratitude too large for words. Emily wiped hers with the back of her hand and laughed. "You didn't warn me there'd be this much leaking after giving birth. You didn't warn me I'd need to start carrying tissues." "You're Elon Musk," she teased. "You could launch a satellite full of tissues." "I might now." They both smiled. The doorbell rang, a soft chime that echoed in the warm stillness. Groceries delivered from a local market. No assistance, no corporate branding. Just a simple list Emily had submitted through an app, and small brown bag now waiting at her doorstep. She opened the door, picked up the bag, and turned back toward the living room, where Elon still stood. "You're staying for dinner, right?" she asked. He blinked. "I thought this was your first night home." "It is," she said, "which means it should start with someone who got me here." He nodded once. "Then I'll stay." Emily set the bag on the kitchen counter and exhaled deeply. A new chapter, a new roof, a baby sleeping against her chest, and a man who had become more than a name in a headline. He wasn't her savior. He was her witness. And together, they had built something far rarer than rockets. They had built trust. The request came on a Monday morning. A message forwarded from Elon's communications office. At first, Emily thought it was spam, just another media outlet sniffing around Musk's orbit for scraps. But this was different. It wasn't clickbait. It wasn't sensational. It was personal. The email was from a producer at Today's Voices, a nationally syndicated talk show known for balancing depth with empathy. The subject line was simple: invitation, a conversation about strength. They weren't asking Elon. They were asking her. 2 days later, Emily sat in the studio in downtown Los Angeles, baby Noah safely asleep with a nanny Elon had personally vetted. The lights above her were warm, a soft amber glow diffusing over a minimal stage set that looked more like a living room than a broadcast platform. She wore a light blue blouse, and her hair was loosely curled, framing her face in a way that made her look, by accident or design, older, wiser, steady. Across from her, the host, Liana Cruz, smiled gently. Liana had interviewed heads of state, survivors, legends. But right now, she looked at Emily like she was the most important person in the room. The red light above the camera blinked on. "We're back with a story that's quietly shaken hearts across the country," Liana said. 17 years old, a pregnancy that nearly broke her, and an unlikely friendship with one of the most powerful men on Earth. Please welcome Emily Rivera. The small audience clapped warmly. Emily offered a nervous smile and a nod. "Emily," Liana began, "a few months ago, you were living on the street. Today, you're raising your son in a home you call your own. When you think about that journey, what word comes to mind first?" Emily took a breath, glanced down at her lap, then met the host's eyes. Unbelievable. In the beginning, everything felt temporary. Even me. A beat of silence. Liana leaned in. "Tell us about the night that changed everything." Emily recounted it carefully: the rain, the cardboard sign, the moment Elon stopped walking, the burritos, the silence, his hesitation, and then his staying. "I didn't know who he was at first," she said. "And even when I did, it didn't matter. Because what he did wasn't flashy. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't throw money at me. He just asked if I was okay. Then he kept showing up." Liana's voice softened. "You've said before that what Elon gave you wasn't a rescue, but something else." Emily nodded. "Yeah, people keep trying to call him my savior. They use that word, saved. But I wasn't drowning. I was unheard. What Elon did was quieter, more radical, honestly." She turned slightly toward the audience. "He didn't save me. He listened." A collective exhale rippled through the crowd. Emily continued, her voice growing steadier. "People think the hardest part of being young and pregnant and alone is the logistics, the food, the shelter. And don't get me wrong, that stuff matters. But what eats at you more is the silence. The feeling that the world doesn't care what happens to you, that your voice is too small to matter." Elon sat beside me when I didn't even believe I deserved company. And he said, "I hear you." That changed everything. Liana was visibly moved, her fingers resting gently on her clipboard. "There was a line in your pre-interview that stood out to me," she said. "You said, 'Strength is not needing to shout to be heard.' Can you explain what you meant?" Emily thought for a moment, then nodded. "When I left home, I was angry. I thought yelling was the only way to be seen. But over time, I realized it's not the volume of your voice, it's who's willing to lean in and listen. Elon did that. And now, I try to do that for my son." She smiled, the kind that cracked through months of exhaustion and made her glow. "In our little house, when he cries, I don't panic. I pause. I listen. I remind him he's not alone. That's what being a parent is. That's what Elon taught me without ever saying it out loud." The camera panned to the audience, quiet, misty-eyed. Liana gave her a long look. "Has he seen you like this before?" Emily laughed. "Public speaking me? Never. And what would you want him to hear if he's watching now?" Emily turned to the camera, heart hammering. But she didn't blink. "Elon, thank you. For showing up. For staying. For letting me be messy and scared and proud all at once. and for never asking me to be less just to fit your story." She paused. "I hope I've become someone worth listening to." Backstage, Elon stood watching the monitor in a small, quiet room. No press, no entourage, just him, arms crossed, chin resting on his hand. He hadn't planned to come, but when Emily asked if he'd be nearby, just in case, he couldn't say no. Now, watching her on screen, composed and radiant and so heartbreakingly honest, he felt something stir in his chest again. That familiar ache he couldn't name. Admiration, pride, love, maybe all of it. He didn't need the spotlight. He had already been given the rarest gift imaginable, to witness someone become. As the applause echoed from the set, he stepped away from the monitor, phone buzzing in his pocket with a dozen missed messages from PR. He ignored them. Instead, he pulled out his notepad app and wrote just 5 words. She never needed saving. Ever. Then he hit save and walked out the side door, unnoticed, grateful. It was late afternoon when the letter arrived. Unmarked envelope. No return address. Just a name typed neatly in block letters, Elon Musk. He found it wedged beneath a stack of documents on his desk at the Tesla offices, likely handed off by a receptionist unaware of its weight. At first glance, it looked like junk mail or a generic request. He nearly tossed it aside, but something about it stopped him. The weight of the paper, the silence it carried. He slid a finger under the flap and unfolded the single sheet inside. The handwriting was rushed, almost hesitant. The words didn't flow, they collided. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know what I did was cowardly, but I've been watching. Not in a creepy way, I swear. Just trying to see what I missed, what I left behind. Emily doesn't know I'm alive. I'm not sure she'd want to, but I do want to meet him. My son, even just once. Please don't throw this away. No name, no signature, just one final line. Tell me what I need to do." Elon read the letter twice, then set it down carefully. The city buzzed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Cars inching forward in LA traffic, planes overhead tracing thin white arcs across a lavender sky. But inside, the air was still. Heavy. For several long minutes, he said nothing. Just breathed. Then, without ceremony, he turned over the letter, pulled a pen from his pocket, and wrote one line in slow, deliberate script. "You're going to have to earn that." He folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and called for a courier. "No anger, no noise, only the truth." Emily stood on the back deck of her little house just before sunset, Noah wrapped snugly in a blanket against her chest, his head tucked under her chin. The sky above them shifted from golden peach to that soft blue only seen at dusk when the sun and moon briefly share custody of the world. She rocked slightly, not because the baby needed it, he was already asleep, but because the rhythm soothed her too. A dance of stillness. Behind her, wind whispered through the trees. A soft breeze brushed her face. She didn't know about the letter. Not yet. Elon hadn't told her, not because he intended to hide it, but because timing mattered. Because not every fire required a siren. Some required silence, patience, and strength. But he would tell her, and she would decide. He had made peace with that. From the porch, Emily looked up at the sky, at the stars just beginning to appear like punctuation marks on an invisible story. "Look," she whispered to Noah, "your friends are waking up." She smiled at the thought. This little boy had survived more before birth than most faced in a decade. And now, he slept like someone who trusted the world. A world his mother had rebuilt from nothing. She kissed the top of his head. "We're going to be okay. You hear me?" Noah stirred slightly, sighed. Behind them, the soft sound of a car door closing signaled Elon's arrival. He didn't call out, just walked quietly to the steps and leaned against the railing. She turned and smiled. "Hey," she said, "perfect timing. We were just naming stars." "Oh yeah," he replied. "Got one for me." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "That one above the tree line. The one that's stubborn about blinking." He followed her gaze. "That's a good one." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he said, "I got a letter today." She looked at him. He didn't elaborate, just said it was from someone who left something behind. Emily understood instantly. Her arms tensed slightly around Noah. He wants to meet him, she asked. Elon nodded. Says he's been watching from afar. She turned back toward the sky. What did you say? He hesitated. I said he'll have to earn that. She was quiet for a long time. Then finally, good. No outrage. No bragdoon. Just a woman who had spent months learning how to carry what others dropped. If he ever tries, she said quietly, he won't find the same girl he left behind. I know, Elon said. He'll find a woman who makes stars look small. She looked at him, eyes soft. And if he really means it, I'll listen. But not for me. For Noah. Elon nodded. He knew she would. And he knew she wouldn't be afraid. Because she was never truly weak. Just unheard. Now, her voice moved like wind through trees, gentle, but capable of shifting everything in its path. As the stars continued to multiply above them, Noah stirred again, blinking into the dusk. Emily whispered, "See that one up there?" She pointed to the brightest star on the horizon. That one's called Hope. She turned to Elon, and it never leaves. Now it's your turn. Where are you watching this story from? Drop the name of your city in the comments and let us know. What part of Emily's journey moved you the most? Share your thoughts below. We're reading every single one. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next story that just might change how you see the world. Until then, keep your eyes on the stars